when Elon Musk stumbled upon a dusty box of his late grandfather Walter's old recordings in a forgotten Pretoria attic. He didn't expect it to unravel a dream his grandfather had whispered only to the stars, a voice echoing engineering tales that shaped a boy's boundless ambition. Little did Elon know, this discovery would spark a gift so extraordinary it would bridge generations, heal a hidden wound, and pull his father, Errol, from the shadows of regret, all through a device born of Elon's relentless mind. It was a crisp evening in his Los Angeles mansion, the city's glow a faint pulse beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, when Elon knelt in his cluttered study, the air thick with the musk of old paper and memory. The clock ticked past midnight, screens flickering with SpaceX schematics, but his sharp eyes were fixed on a cardboard box. Yellowed, taped shut, unearthed from a storage crate shipped from South Africa after years of neglect. His hands, still rough from a day tinkering at Tesla's factory, tore it open, spilling out a treasure he hadn't known he'd lost. Reel-to-reel tapes, their labels faded but legible in Walter's precise scrawl. Rocket Theories, 1955. Flight Dreams, 1960. Stories for the boys. Elon's chest tightened, a rare pang cutting through his steel focus, as he lifted a tape, its plastic cool against his fingers, a relic of the grandfather who died when he was just a kid. Walter Musk, the quiet Canadian engineer whose tales of flight and physics had lit a fire in a young Elon's mind. He could see Walter now, silver hair glinting under a Pretoria porch light, voice low and steady, spinning stories of propellers and constellations while Elon, barely 6, sat wide-eyed, Kimball asleep beside him. "One day, laddie," Walter had said, pointing to the stars, "you'll build something that touches them, something grand." Those nights had fueled Elon. Every Tesla battery, every SpaceX launch traced back to Walter's spark, a man who'd tinkered in garages, flown planes, and dreamed big, even when life boxed him into a modest corner. Now, decades later, here were his words, captured, waiting, a voice Elon hadn't heard since childhood. He carried the tapes to his desk, shoving aside a half-eaten sandwich and a tangle of cables, his mind already racing. A gift, a tribute, something to bring Walter back, not just for him but for the family. The Neuralink lab flashed in his thoughts, its brain tech breakthroughs humming with potential, and an idea ignited. A wearable device, a memory echo, laced with Walter's recordings, synced to Neuralink's neural interface. Simple tech by their standards, a chip that could play his grandfather's voice in their minds, clear as if he were there. It'd be a keepsake. May could hear her father's laugh, Kimball his bedtime tales, Errol. Well, Errol could face the father he'd drifted from, a bridge across years of silence. Elon's fingers drummed the desk, restless, the vision sharpening. A sleek band, lightweight, solar-powered. Walter's stories woven into its code, a whisper from the past for the future. He grabbed his phone, the screen's glare sharp in the dim room, and dialed Jared Burkle, his right-hand man, voice crisp despite the hour. "Jared, it's me, new project, Neuralink Echo, top priority," he said, pacing, boots scuffing the hardwood. "Found Grandpa Walter's tapes, old recordings, stories, theories. Want them in a Neuralink wearable, voice synced to brainwaves, family use. Start now, team by dawn." Jared's pause crackled through, steady as ever. "Walter's tapes? The flight guy from Pretoria?" "Yeah," Elon said, voice low, a crack in his steel. 8 weeks, family reunion deadline, absolute secrecy, no leaks. Jared didn't flinch. "Got it, labs on alert, engineers by morning. They'll love this one." The call ended, leaving Elon alone with the hum of his screens, the tapes a quiet weight beside him. He sank into his chair, spinning a reel between his fingers, sharp eyes tracing its edges. Walter's voice trapped inside, a man who'd built planes from scratch, who'd sketched rockets on napkins, who'd sat Elon on his knee and said, "Dream big, laddie, bigger than me." Elon saw those Pretoria nights. Walter's workshop, oil and metal thick in the air, tools clattering as he taught a boy to solder, to dream. "You'll fly higher than I ever did," Walter had said once, voice steady despite a cough, a weariness Elon hadn't understood then. Cancer, creeping slow, stealing him before Elon could say goodbye. The tapes were all that remained. Walter's spark, his lessons, a legacy Elon had carried without knowing its full weight, now a gift he'd forged with his own hands. The idea grew. Neuralink's tech could do more than play sound. It could weave Walter's voice into memory, emotion, a neural echo that'd feel real, like he was there, talking rockets with Elon, teasing Kimball, soothing May. For Errol, well, Errol was trickier, a man who'd buried his father's death under gruff silence, who'd drifted from the family as Elon soared. Maybe this could pull him back, a voice to heal what words couldn't. a regret Elon didn't know lingered, a wound he'd uncover too late. He pictured the reunion, May's tears, Kimball's laugh, Errol's sharp eyes softening, Walter's voice alive in their minds, a circle he'd close with tech and heart. He stood, pacing the study, the city's glow a faint hum beyond, Los Angeles sprawling, a testament to his dreams, but this was different, raw, a debt to the man who'd lit the fuse. The tape sat there, reels glinting, Walter's scrawl a map to the past, flight dreams, stories for the boys. And Elon's mind spun, the Neuralink echo taking shape. A band, sleek, silver, solar cells woven into its curve, a chip syncing voice to brain, Walter's tales a steady pulse. He saw Pretoria, Walter's hands, rough from work, guiding his own, small and eager, over a circuit board. "You'll build wonders, laddie," Walter had said, voice low, steady, a spark Elon carried to Tesla, to SpaceX, to this moment, this gift. He grabbed a tablet, sketching fast, lines sharp, specs bold, a prototype by week's end, 8 weeks to finish, a deadline that'd test even his relentless pace. The Neuralink lab could do it. Engineers tweaking brainwave syncs, coders threading Walter's voice into neural paths, a gift simple yet grand, a whisper from the stars. He texted Kimball, quick, curt. "Found Grandpa's tapes, building something, secret, family reunion, 8 weeks, help me get Errol there." Kimball buzzed back. "Tapes? Hell yeah, Errol's tricky, but I'm in, what's the plan?" Elon typed, "You'll see, keep it quiet," and pocketed the phone, sharp eyes on the tapes, a fire in his gut, Walter's voice a gift, a bridge. The night deepened, the mansion's silence save for the hum of screens, and Elon lifted a reel, stories for the boys, and held it to the light, sharp eyes glistening, a rare crack in his steel. He saw Walter, silver hair, steady hands, voice low under Pretoria's stars, telling tales of flight, of dreams, a man who'd given him the sky without asking a thing. "For you, Grandpa," he murmured, voice rough, raw, raising a water bottle to the dark window, a toast to the past, to the gift he'd build. A Neuralink echo, a voice to heal, a circle to close, 8 weeks away, a deadline he'd meet or break trying. Elon Musk leaned back in his Los Angeles study, the faint hum of the city a distant pulse beyond the windows, his sharp eyes drifting shut as the reel-to-reel tapes of his late grandfather, Walter Musk, sat quiet on his desk. Relics of a voice that had shaped his relentless dreams, now fueling a gift he'd forged with Neuralink's cutting-edge tech. The clock ticked past 2 a.m., screens flickering with SpaceX schematics and Tesla blueprints, but Elon's mind wasn't here. It was lost in the dusty glow of Pretoria nights, in the echoes of Walter's steady tales, in the sacrifices of a man who'd given him the stars without ever asking for a spotlight. The tapes, yellowed, fragile, labeled in Walter's precise scrawl, were a bridge to those years, a spark he'd carried through decades, and as he traced their edges with a calloused finger, memories surged sharp and vivid, pulling him back to the boy he'd been, wide-eyed under a grandfather's gentle gaze, a boy who'd one day build wonders from those whispered lessons. He could see it now, Pretoria's summer haze, the air thick with dust and heat, a small house with a sagging porch where Walter sat, silver hair glinting under a bare bulb, his voice a low rumble over the cricket's hum. Elon, barely 6, perched on a rickety stool, knees drawn up, hands sticky with lemonade Walter had pressed into them. Homemade tart, a rare treat from a man who stretched every rand thin. Kimball slept beside him, head lolling on Elon's shoulder, but Elon stayed awake, sharp eyes locked on Walter as he spun tales of flight. Propellers slicing the sky, planes he'd built in Canada, dreams of rockets piercing the stars. "You'll fly higher than I ever did, laddie," Walter said, voice steady despite the weariness in his frame, a cough breaking through he'd brushed off with a grin. Elon hadn't known then cancer, creeping slow, a thief in the shadows. But he'd felt the spark, a fire lit by stories of thrust and lift, of engineering wonders Walter had crafted in garages, a legacy he'd passed to a boy too young to grasp its weight. The scene shifted, sharp as a blade. Walter's workshop, a tin-roofed shed behind the house, oil and metal thick in the air, tools clattering as Elon, now 8, handed him a wrench, small fingers fumbling but eager. The bulb buzzed overhead, casting shadows on a half-built engine, a contraption of gears and pipes Walter had salvaged from junkyards, his hands rough from years of flight and fix-it jobs. "See this, laddie?" Walter said, voice low, steady, guiding Elon's hand to tighten a bolt. "It's not about the parts, it's the way they fit, the way they work together, simple, strong, like the stars." Elon's chest swelled, sharp eyes wide, tracing the engine's lines. Walter's lessons sinking deep, a blueprint for Tesla's batteries, SpaceX's rockets, a mind wired to bend the impossible. One day, you'll build something grand, Walter murmured, a cough breaking through. A weariness Elon saw but didn't name, a man pouring dreams into a boy while his own flickered dim. Another memory flared, Pretoria's winter chill, the house dark save for a kerosene lamp's glow, Walter at the kitchen table, sketching on a napkin, Elon beside him, breath fogging in the cold. Kimball slept upstairs, May's soft hum drifting from the hall, but Elon stayed, sharp eyes locked on Walter's pencil as it traced a rocket, sleek, bold, a dream from a man who'd flown planes but never touched space. "Takes guts, laddie," Walter said, voice low, steady, a cough rattling his chest he'd waved off with a grin. "Guts and math. Figure the thrust, the fuel, and you're halfway there." Elon traced the lines, small hands smudging the ink, a vow forming he couldn't voice. "I'll build it, Grandpa, someday." A promise to a man who'd sold his best tools to buy Elon's first books, who'd skipped meals to keep the lights on, who'd dreamed big in a world too small to hold him. The images piled up, vivid and heavy. Walter on the porch, stars blazing overhead, voice low as he told tales of constellations. Orion's belt a map to the future. Elon at his knee, asking, "Why don't you fly to them, Grandpa?" Walter's laugh, rough, warm, breaking into a cough he'd brushed off. "Too old, laddie. My wings are clipped, but yours will soar." Elon saw the shed again, Walter's hands guiding his own over a circuit board, sparks flying as they soldered wires, a lesson in persistence. "Fix it, laddie, or it stays broken." A mantra Elon carried to Zip2, to Tesla, to SpaceX. A spark from a man who'd tinkered through nights, hiding weariness under gruff grins, giving a boy the tools to dream beyond Pretoria's dust. Now, in the study, Elon opened his eyes, the tapes a quiet weight beside him, sharp eyes glistening, rare crack in his steel as he spun a reel. "Stories for the boys," between his fingers. He saw Walter's face, silver hair, steady eyes, a cough he'd masked with tales, a man who'd died too soon, cancer stealing him before Elon could say goodbye, before Errol could mend the rift Elon hadn't understood then. He remembered the funeral, Pretoria's gray drizzle, Errol silent, sharp eyes hard, a man who'd buried his father's death under gruff distance, who'd drifted as Elon soared, a regret Elon sensed but couldn't name. The tapes were Walter's voice, his spark, his lessons, a legacy Elon had carried without knowing its full depth, now a gift to bring him back, to heal what time had broken. He stood, pacing the hardwood, the city's glow a faint hum beyond. Los Angeles sprawling, a testament to his dreams, but this was raw, a debt to the man who'd lit the fuse. He saw Walter's shed oil-stained, cluttered, a rocket sketch pinned to the wall, Walter's voice low. "You'll touch the stars, laddie, higher than me." Those nights had built him. Every Tesla hum, every SpaceX roar, a spark from a man who'd given him the sky, who'd coughed through tales to keep a boy dreaming, who'd faded before Elon could repay him. The Neuralink echo burned in his mind, a wearable, sleek, silver, solar-powered. Walter's voice synced to brainwaves, a whisper from the past to mend the present, to pull Errol from silence, to give May her father's laugh, Kimball his tales, a family a piece of the man they'd lost. He grabbed his tablet, sketching fast, lines bold, specs precise, a band with a chip, Neuralink's tech threading Walter's voice into memory, emotion, a neural echo to feel real, like he was there. He saw Pretoria, Walter's hands, rough from work, guiding his own over a propeller, saying, "Dream big, laddie, bigger than me." The tapes were his spark, rocket theories, flight dreams. A legacy Elon would forge into a gift, 8 weeks to finish, a deadline he'd meet with his relentless fire. He texted Jared again, sharp, curt. "Tapes to lab dawn, Neuralink team, full push, echoes live." Jared buzzed back. "On it, team's ready." Walter's voice, huh? Hell of a gift. Elon pocketed the phone, sharp eyes on the tapes, a fire in his gut. Walter's voice, a bridge, a circle to close, a gift to heal a regret he didn't yet know. The night deepened, the mansion's silence save for the hum of screens, and Elon lifted a reel. Stories for the boys. Holding it to the light, sharp eyes glistening, a rare crack in his steel. He saw Walter, silver hair, steady hands, voice low under Pretoria's stars, a man who'd given him the sky, who'd faded too soon, a spark Elon carried to this moment, this gift. "For you, Grandpa," he murmured, voice rough, raw, raising a water bottle to the dark window, a toast to the past, to the Neuralink echo, a voice to heal, a circle to close, 8 weeks away, a fight he'd win or break trying. The Los Angeles dawn crept through the study's wide windows, a soft gold brushing the hardwood as Elon Musk hunched over his desk, sharp eyes locked on a tablet glowing with the Neuralink Echo's blueprint. A sleek band to carry his late grandfather Walter's voice, a gift to weave a lost legacy into his family's minds. The clock ticked past 5 a.m., the cities hum a faint pulse beyond, screens flickering with SpaceX trajectories and Tesla specs, but Elon's world was here, tapes stacked beside him, yellowed reels labeled in Walter's precise scrawl. Rocket theories, flight dreams, stories for the boys. A spark from Pretoria nights he'd forge into something grand. His hands, rough from a day at the factory, traced the sketch, lines bold, specs sharp, a vision taking shape. A wearable, silver and light, solar cells glinting on its curve, Neuralink's tech threading Walter's voice into brainwaves, a neural echo to feel real, a whisper from the past to heal the present. 8 weeks to the family reunion, a deadline burning in his gut, and this blueprint was the heart. A gift for May, Kimball, Errol, a bridge to the grandfather who'd lit his relentless fire. He zoomed in on the band, its frame sleek yet sturdy, a nod to Walter's engineering. Simple, strong, like the planes he'd built in Canada, the engines he'd tinkered with in Pretoria. The solar cells shimmered in the design, thin as a whisper, powering a chip no bigger than a coin. Neuralink's magic, syncing voice to memory, emotion, a tech Walter would have grinned at, rough hands itching to take it apart. Elon's sharp eyes narrowed, adjusting the specs. Battery life endless under sun, audio crisp as Walter's low rumble, a signal steady through neural paths. He pictured it. May hearing her father's laugh, Kimball his bedtime tales, Errol facing the voice he'd buried under gruff silence, a regret Elon sensed but couldn't name. The tapes sat there, reels glinting, a treasure from a man who'd coughed through stories to keep a boy dreaming, a legacy Elon would pull from the past into the stars. He tapped the tablet, layering in details, the band's curve ergonomic, fitting May's wrist, Kimball's, even Errol's, a design Walter would have called practical, laddie. The chip's code hummed in his mind. Neuralink's brainwave syncs, a tweak to thread Walter's voice into thought, a whisper to feel like he was there, spinning tales of flight under Pretoria stars. Elon saw those nights, Walter's porch, bulb buzzing, voice steady despite a cough, saying, "It's the structure, laddie, simple, strong like the sky." The echo would be that. Simple, a band anyone could wear, strong, carrying Walter's spark through decades, a gift to mend what time had frayed. He added a haptic pulse, soft, a nudge when Walter's voice played, a touch like his grandfather's hand on his shoulder, guiding a boy's solder over a circuit board. The phone buzzed, Jared Burkle, voice crisp despite the hour. "Teams up, Elon, Neuralink Lab, dawn shift. Tapes are here, engineers buzzing," he said, steady as ever. "What's the play?" Elon paced, boots scuffing the floor, sharp eyes on the blueprint. Echo, wearable band, solar-powered, Neuralink chip, syncs Walter's voice from the tapes to brainwaves. Family use, 8 weeks, reunion deadline, full push, no leaks. Jared's pause crackled through. Walter's voice, in our heads? Hell of a tribute, tech's ready. Close enough, Elon said, voice low, a crack in his steel. Tweak the syncs, code the tapes, prototype by week's end go. Jared didn't flinch. Labs live, coders on audio, techs on chips. Walter's gonna fly again. The call ended, leaving Elon with the hum of his screens, the blueprint glowing. A gift, a bridge, a spark reignited. He sank back, tablet in hand, sharp eyes tracing the design. Walter's voice would live here, in this band, a neural echo to pull May from quiet nights, Kimball from restless days, Errol from a silence Elon couldn't pierce. He saw Pretoria, Walter's shed oil thick, tools clattering, a rocket sketch pinned to the wall, voice low. You'll touch the stars, laddie, higher than me. Those lessons had built him. Every Tesla hum, every SpaceX roar, a spark from a man who'd given him the sky, who'd coughed through tales to keep a boy dreaming, who'd faded before Elon could repay him. The echo would be more, Walter's laugh, his theories, his stories, a whisper to heal a family stretched by time. A regret Elon didn't yet know lingered in Errol's sharp eyes, a wound he'd uncover too late. He tweaked the sketch, solar cells thinner, chips smaller, audio layered with Walter's cadence, a rumble like Pretoria crickets under stars. He pictured the reunion, May's tears, Kimball's grin, Errol's gruff shell cracking, Walter's voice alive in their minds, a circle he'd close with tech and heart. The tapes sat there, flight dreams, stories for the boys. A legacy he'd weave into this band, a gift simple yet grand, a whisper from a man who'd dreamed big in a world too small. He saw Walter's hands, rough, steady, guiding his own over a propeller, saying, "Dream big, laddie, bigger than me." The echo would carry that, Walter's spark, his lessons, a voice to mend what death had broken, to pull Errol from a silence Elon sensed but couldn't name, a regret he'd face in 8 weeks. He stood, pacing the study, the city's glow a faint hum. Los Angeles sprawling, a testament to his dreams, but this was raw, a debt to the man who'd lit the fuse. He grabbed a reel, Rocket Theories, and held it to the light, sharp eyes glistening, a rare crack in his steel as he saw Pretoria. Walter's porch, stars blazing, voice low. You'll fly higher, laddie, higher than me. Those nights had built him. Every Tesla battery, every SpaceX launch, a spark from a man who'd tinkered through coughs, who'd given him the sky without asking a thing. The blueprint burned in his mind. Neuralink's tech, Walter's voice, a band to heal a family, a gift to close a circle, 8 weeks to finish, a deadline he'd meet with his relentless fire. He texted Kimball, sharp, curt. Echoes live, Neuralink, Grandpa's voice. 8 weeks, reunion. Help me get Errol there, quiet. Kimball buzzed back. Walter's voice? Damn, Errol's tough, but I'll drag him. What's it do? Elon typed. You'll hear, trust me, and pocketed the phone, sharp eyes on the tapes, a fire in his gut. Walter's voice, a gift, a bridge, a regret to heal, a circle to close, 8 weeks away, a fight he'd win or break trying. The dawn deepened, the mansion's silence save for the hum of screens, and Elon lifted a reel. Stories for the boys. Sharp eyes glistening, a rare crack in his steel. For you, Grandpa, he murmured, voice rough, raw, raising a water bottle to the dawn window, a toast to the past, to the Neuralink echo, a voice to heal, a circle to close, a gift he'd forge with all he had. The Durban sun dipped low over the city's ragged edge, a golden haze spilling through the cracked window of Elon Musk's modest flat, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor where he sat alone, sharp blue eyes fixed on a chipped mug of tea cradled in his trembling hands. The sea's faint roar seeped through the thin walls, a steady hum mingling with the TV's drone. News of SpaceX's latest launch flickering on screen. Elon's voice a distant echo from a world Errol had watched his son conquer, a world far from this quiet life. At 79, his weathered frame slumped in a sagging armchair, hands rough from years of engineering and flying planes, now shaky with age, or something more, a secret he buried under gruff silence. The flat was small, peeling paint, a cluttered shelf of old tools and photos, a single bulb flickering overhead. But it was enough for him, a man who'd never asked for more than what kept his boys dreaming, a man who'd drifted from them as they soared, a regret he wouldn't name, simmering beneath his stern shell. He shifted, a wince crossing his face as he set the mug down, the ache in his chest a dull thud he'd brushed off for months. Nothing, he told himself, just old bones creaking, though the coughs came sharper now, the breath shorter, a shadow he hid from the world. The shelf caught his eye, photos faded but alive. Elon at a Tesla unveiling, sharp eyes blazing, Kimball with his kids, grinning wide, and one of Walter Musk, silver hair glinting on a Pretoria porch, a steady smile breaking through a cough Errol hadn't understood then. Beside it sat a wooden box, small, etched with a rocket, Walter's gift to a young Elon, a relic Errol had kept when his father died, a tether to a past he'd buried under years of gruff distance, a regret he couldn't face, not even now, as Walter's absence echoed in the flat stillness. The door creaked and Kimball Musk stepped in, broad frame filling the narrow hall, a bag of groceries swinging from his hand. Bread, fish, tea, the basics Errol lived on, a life pared to the bone. Hey, Papa, Kimball said, voice warm, dropping the bag on the counter, his grin a flash of Pretoria summers. Caught Elon's launch on the radio, another rocket up, crazy stuff. Errol grunted, waving a hand, sharp eyes flicking to the TV. Elon's face, sharp and restless, a son he'd raised to outgrow him. Always at it, that boy. Good for him, he murmured, voice gruff, pride buried deep, a cough breaking through he masked with a sip of tea. Kimball's gaze lingered, catching the tremble in Errol's hands, the wince he hid, a frown creasing his brow. You okay? Looking rough, tired more lately. Errol straightened, gruffness flaring, sharp eyes hard. Fine, Mijo, old age, that's all, don't fuss. Kimball didn't push, unpacking the groceries. Fish for Errol's stew, a ritual from lean years when he'd stretched it thin, giving the boys the meat while he chewed bones, claiming he liked them best. Now alone, he cooked it from habit, the pot clinking on the stove, steam rising as he stirred, the ache flaring sharp but lost in the rhythm. A quiet life, a man who'd built planes, fixed engines, raised sons, now paired to tea and shadows. He saw Pretoria, Walter's shed oil-thick, tools clattering, voice low. You'll fly high, laddie. A spark he'd passed to Elon, a dream he'd watched fade as cancer took him, a loss Errol had buried under gruff silence, drifting from May, from Kimball, from the boy who'd soared beyond him. The photos watched, Walter steady, Elon blazing, a past he couldn't touch, a regret he wouldn't name, simmering in the ache he hid. He ladled stew into a bowl, leaving half for tomorrow, a habit from years when every bite counted, and sat back, the chair creaking under his slight frame. Sharp eyes on the TV. Elon's voice, sharp, relentless, a son who'd built wonders from Walter's spark. "That's my boy," he muttered, voice low, gruff, a pride swelling he wouldn't voice, the ache a thud he brushed off. Nothing, just age, he told himself, a lie he'd honed over months. Kimball poked his head in, jacket on, grin soft. "Gotta run, kids waiting, sure you're good?" Errol waved him off, sharp eyes steady. "Go Mijo, tell Elon hi, don't fuss." Kimball hesitated, catching the cough Errol masked, then left, the flat falling silence save for the sea's hum, a rhythm Errol knew like his own pulse. He stood slow, a wince breaking through as he shuffled to the shelf, sharp eyes on the wooden box. Walter's rocket, Elon's hands carving it under Pretoria stars, a boy's vow he'd heard but never grasped. "You'll build it, laddie," Walter had said, voice steady despite a cough, a spark Errol had watched fade, a loss he'd buried when cancer stole his father, a rift he'd widened with silence, drifting from May's warmth, Kimball's grin, Elon's fire. He lifted the box, rough hands trembling, the ache flaring sharp, a thud, a cough, a shadow he wouldn't name, a regret simmering under gruff pride, a past he couldn't face, not yet. He saw Walter, silver hair, steady eyes, voice low. "Dream big, laddie, bigger than me." A man who'd given them the sky, who'd faded too soon, a spark Errol had let slip, a wound he'd carried in silence. The TV droned, SpaceX's triumph, Elon's voice a distant hum, a son who'd soared where Walter dreamed, where Errol hadn't. He sank back, mug in hand, sharp eyes glistening, a rare crack in his steel as he traced the box. Walter's spark, Elon's vow, a legacy he'd watched from afar, a regret he couldn't voice, simmering in the ache he hid. He didn't know, not yet, that Elon was in LA forging a gift from those tapes, a Neuralink echo to bring Walter's voice back, a whisper to heal a family, a bridge to pull him from silence, a regret he'd face in 8 weeks. The sea roared, a steady pulse beyond, and Errol sat still, sharp eyes on the past, a quiet life shadowed by a spark he'd let fade, a truth he'd buried too long. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching, and Errol sipped his tea, the ache a thud he ignored. Nothing, he told himself, just old bones, a lie he'd lived as he drifted, a man who'd raised sons to soar, who'd kept Walter's loss locked tight, a regret simmering under gruff silence, a wound he'd face when Walter's voice broke through, a gift he didn't yet know waited. The Los Angeles dusk painted the sky in streaks of orange and purple, a soft glow spilling through the wide windows of Elon Musk's study as he paced the hardwood floor, sharp eyes darting between the Neuralink Echo blueprint on his tablet and the stack of Walter's tapes. Yellowed reels that held his grandfather's voice, a legacy he'd weave into a gift to bridge a family stretched by time. The clock ticked past 6 p.m., the cities hum a steady pulse beyond, screens flickering with SpaceX updates and Tesla diagnostics, but Elon's mind burned with the echo. A sleek band, solar-powered, Neuralink's tech syncing Walter's stories to brainwaves, a whisper from the past to heal the present. 8 weeks to the family reunion, a deadline searing his gut, and he needed Errol there, gruff, distant Errol, whose silence hid a regret Elon sensed but couldn't name, a wound this gift might mend if he could pull him from Durban's shadows. The tapes sat quiet, rocket theories, stories for the boys. A spark from Pretoria nights he'd forge into something grand, but first he needed Kimball, his brother's charm a key to crack Errol's shell. Elon grabbed his phone, the screen's glare sharp in the dimming light, and dialed Kimball, boots scuffing the floor as he paced, sharp eyes on the blueprint. A band to carry Walter's voice, a neural echo for May, Kimball, Errol, a circle to close. The call rang twice, then Kimball's voice crackled through, warm and groggy, Durban's night a faint hum behind, crickets chirping, a dog barking down the street. "Elon, it's late here, past midnight. What's up?" Kimball said, a yawn breaking his words, a grin Elon could hear despite the miles. Elon didn't pause, voice low, blunt, cutting through. "Need you, Kimball. 8 weeks, family reunion, LA. Got something big. Walter's tapes. Neuralink echo. Errol's gotta be there. Secret, no leaks." Kimball's pause buzzed through, the silence heavy with surprise, then a low whistle. "Walter's tapes? That Neuralink thing, his voice? Damn, Elon, he'll lose it. Errol's a tough nut, though." Elon stopped pacing, leaning against the desk, sharp eyes on the tapes. Walters scrawl a map to the past, a spark he'd carried to the stars, a gift to pull Errol from silence. "That's why I need you," he said, voice steady, a crack in his steel. "Charm him. Get him here. Family excuse, reunion. Don't spill the echo. 8 weeks, Kimball. Make it stick." Kimball chuckled, soft, warm, a sound from Pretoria summers when they'd schemed under Walter's steady gaze. He'll grumble. Why drag an old man halfway round the world? But I'll swing it, grandkids, maybe soften him up. He's a sucker for them, Kimball said, voice bright, a brother's instinct kicking in. What's this echo do? Play Walter's voice in our heads. Elon's throat tightened, sharp eyes glistening, a rare pang at the thought. Walter's rumble alive again. Yeah, Neuralink syncs it. Feels real, like he's there. Tails theories, 8 weeks, teams on it. Kimball's tone softened, a shift Elon felt across the miles. He'll cry, Elon, gruff old Errol. Walter's voice'll break him. Saw him yesterday, quieter lately, slower. Keeps it tight, but something's off. Elon's chest tightened, sharp eyes narrowing, a flicker of doubt cutting through. Errol's gruff shell, his coughs in Durban, a wince he'd brushed off last visit, a shadow he'd ignored. Slower? He said, voice low, blunt, a sun's fire stirring. Tired more, chest thing, won't say. Old age, he claims, Kimball murmured, concern threading through. Keep an eye on him, Elon said, sharp, steady, the echo's stakes rising. Walter's voice, a gift to mend, a regret to heal, a father to pull close. Get him here, reunion. 8 weeks, no leaks go. Kimball hummed, a nod Elon could feel. Got it, family catch-up, grandkids hook, quiet. I'll drag him, trust me. The call lingered, Kimball's voice dropping low, warm. He talks about you, quiet, when he thinks I'm not listening. Elon's touching the stars, he said, watching that launch, proud, even if he won't shout it. Elon swallowed, sharp eyes glistening, a crack in his steel. Errol in Durban, tea in hand, TV flickering with SpaceX fire, a faint smile breaking his stern face, a pride he'd buried deep. Doesn't need to shout, Elon murmured, more to himself, voice rough, raw. I know, 8 weeks make it happen. Kimball chuckled, soft. He'll grumble, jet lag fuss, but I'll get him, Walter's voice, huh? Hell of a gift, see you then. The call ended, leaving Elon with the hum of his screens, the tapes a quiet wait, the blueprint glowing, a gift, a bridge, a spark to heal. He set the phone down, slow, deliberate, sharp eyes on the echo's design, sleek, silver, solar cells glinting, a chip to carry Walter's voice, a whisper to pull Errol from silence, to mend a regret he couldn't name. He saw Pretoria, Walter's porch, bulb buzzing, voice low. He'll fly higher, laddie. A cough breaking through he'd brushed off, a spark Elon carried to this moment, this gift. 8 weeks wasn't long, a deadline to test his relentless fire. But he'd bent time before, launched rockets on tighter clocks, built Tesla from dust. He needed Kimball's charm, Errol's gruff shell, his drift from them, a silence this echo might crack, a voice to heal a wound Elon sensed but couldn't pierce, not yet. The tapes sat there, flight dreams, stories for the boys. A legacy he'd weave into this band, a gift to close a circle, to pull a family from shadows. He paced again, boots scuffing, sharp eyes tracing the blueprint. Walter's voice would live here, a neural echo to spark May's tears, Kimball's grin, Errol's sharp eyes softening, a regret he'd face in 8 weeks. He saw Durban, Errol's flat, tea steaming, TV flickering with Elon's fire, a cough he'd masked, a wince he'd dodged, a shadow Elon couldn't name. Keep an eye on him, he'd said, a vow simmering, Walter's voice a gift, a bridge, a chance to mend what time had frayed, a father he'd pull close, a regret he'd heal. The city's glow hummed beyond, a testament to his dreams. But this was raw, a debt to Walter, a spark from Pretoria nights, a man who'd given him the sky, a gift to heal a family, a circle to close. He grabbed the tablet, tweaking the design, chip smaller, sync sharper, audio layered with Walter's rumble, a voice to feel real, to pull Errol from silence, to heal a regret he sensed but couldn't name. He saw Pretoria, Walter's shed oil-thick, voice low. Dream big, laddie, bigger than me. A cough breaking through, a spark Elon carried to this moment, this gift. 8 weeks, a fight he'd win or break trying, a deadline searing his gut, a gift to close a circle, to heal a family, a whisper from the stars. The dusk deepened, the mansion silent save for the hum of screens, and Elon lifted a reel, stories for the boys. Sharp eyes glistening, a rare crack in his steel. For you, Grandpa, he murmured, voice rough, raw, a vow to the past, to the Neuralink echo, a voice to heal, a circle to close, a fight he'd wage with all he had. The California sun blazed over the Neuralink lab in Hawthorne, a sleek sprawl of glass and steel humming with quiet intensity as Elon Musk stood at its heart, sharp eyes tracing the first Neuralink Echo prototype. A silver band glinting on a workbench, its solar cells catching the light, a chip poised to carry his late grandfather Walter's voice into the minds of his family. Dust motes danced in the morning glow streaming through high windows, the air thick with solder and static, a steady buzz of engineers and coders swirling around him. Tools clattering, screens flickering, a rhythm Elon knew from Tesla's factories and SpaceX's launch pads. His boots scuffed the polished floor, mud from Big Sur still clinging to their edges, a remnant of the storm he'd fought days ago, but his mind burned with the echo. 8 weeks to the family reunion, a deadline searing his gut, a gift to pull Errol from silence, to heal a regret he sensed but couldn't name, a whisper from Pretoria nights he'd forge into reality with Walter's tapes. He stepped closer, sharp eyes narrowing on the band, sleek, light, a curve Walter would have called practical laddie. Its solar cells thin as a whisper, powering a chip no bigger than a dime, Neuralink's tech ready to sync Walter's voice to brainwaves, a neural echo to feel real. The tapes sat nearby, rocket theories, flight dreams, stories for the boys. Yellowed reels Elon had handed off at dawn, their labels in Walter's precise scrawl a spark from a past he'd carried to this moment, a legacy he'd weave into this gift. Jared Burkle stood at his side, tablet glowing, voice crisp over the lab's hum. Teams live Elon, coders threading the tapes, text tweaking the chip. First syncs in play, he said, steady as ever, a grin breaking through. Walter's voice, hell of a start. Elon nodded, sharp eyes on the band, a fire in his gut. 8 weeks, a fight he'd win, a gift to mend a family, a circle to close. The lab buzzed, engineers hunched over screens, lines of code scrolling fast. A coder named Priya feeding Walter's tapes into a digital loom, her fingers dancing as audio peeled from reels, a low rumble breaking through static. You'll fly higher, laddie. Walter's voice, steady despite a cough, a spark Elon felt in his bones. Signals clean, Priya called, voice sharp, eyes bright behind glasses. Syncs at 80%, neural feed stable, needs a tweak for depth. Elon stepped to her station, sharp eyes tracing the waveform. Walter's cadence, a whisper from Pretoria nights, a tale of rockets he'd heard at 6, wide-eyed on a porch under stars. Push it, 100%, depth's key, make it feel real, he said, voice low, blunt, a crack in his steel. Walter's voice, a gift, a bridge, a regret to heal. A tech named Leo hefted the band, solar cells glinting, soldering a wire thin as thread, his hands steady as he fused the chip. Neuralink's magic, a neural sync to thread Walter's voice into memory, emotion, a whisper to pull May's tears, Kimball's grin, Errol's sharp eyes from silence. Power's holding, solar's live, chips syncing, Leo said, voice steady over the sawdust hiss, a grin breaking through. Prototype's rough, week's end, it's gold. Elon's sharp eyes narrowed, tracing the band. Walter's practicality, his spark, a gift to close a circle, a regret he sensed in Errol's gruff drift, a wound he'd mend in 8 weeks. No rough, smooth it, 5 days, full sync, go, he said, voice sharp, relentless, a fire driving him. Walter's voice, a legacy, a family to heal. The lab pulsed, screens glowed, tools clattered, a coder tweaking neural feeds, Priya threading stories for the boys into code, Walter's rumble breaking through. Guts and math, laddie. Figure the thrust, you're there. A tale Elon saw in Pretoria's dust, Walter's porch, bulb buzzing, voice steady despite a cough, a spark he'd carried to SpaceX, to this moment, this gift. He paced, sharp eyes darting, band on the bench, tapes spinning, a dream taking shape, a whisper to pull Errol from Durban's shadows, a regret he couldn't name, simmering in a father's silence. He saw Walter, silver hair, steady hands, voice low. Dream big, laddie, bigger than me. A man who'd coughed through tales, who'd given him the sky, a spark he'd forge into this echo, a gift to heal a family stretched by time. Jared stepped up, tablet flashing. Weather alerts, a storm brewing off the coast, dark clouds looming 3 days out, a threat to the lab's solar grid. Storms coming, Elon, 60 miles per hour winds. Could knock power, backup's tight, he said, voice low, steady, a frown creasing his brow. Elon's jaw tightened, sharp eyes on the band. Walter's voice, a gift, a deadline searing. 8 weeks, a fight he'd win, a storm he'd bend. No knocks, triple the backup, solar's live. Pumps if it floods, 3 days we beat it, he snapped, voice sharp, relentless, a fire in his gut. Walter's voice, a legacy, a family to heal, a regret to mend. Jared nodded, tapping fast. On it, generators up, teams pushing. Storm won't stop this. The lab surged, techs hauling gear, coders racing code, a rhythm Elon drove, a gift to close a circle, a whisper from Pretoria nights. He crouched by the band, sharp eyes tracing its curve, solar cells glinting, chip humming, Walter's voice threading through, a neural echo to feel real, to pull Errol from silence, to heal a regret he sensed in Durban's shadows, a wound he'd face in 8 weeks. He saw Pretoria, Walter's shed oil-thick, voice low. "You'll fly higher, laddie." A cough breaking through, a spark he'd carried to this moment, this gift. The lab hummed, Priya's screen glowing, Walter's rumble, stories for the boys. A tale of constellations, Orion's belt, a map to the future, a boy wide-eyed under stars, a spark Elon forged into this echo, a gift to mend a family, a regret he couldn't name. He stood, sharp eyes on the band, a fire in his gut. 8 weeks, a fight he'd win, a gift to heal, a circle to close. The sun climbed, light blazing through glass, and Elon grabbed his phone, texting Kimball, sharp, curt. Echoes live, Neuralink, Grandpa's voice. 3 days, Storm. 8 weeks, reunion, Errol, go. Kimball buzzed back. Storm? Damn, Errol's grumbling, grandkid's hook, quiet. I'll get him, echoes wild. Elon pocketed it, sharp eyes on the tapes. Walter's voice, a legacy, a gift, a bridge, a regret to heal, a circle to close, 8 weeks away, a fight he'd wage with all he had. The lab pulsed, screens flickered, tools clattered, a storm loomed, a gift rose, a whisper from the past, a spark from Pretoria nights, a voice to heal a family, a regret he'd mend, a deadline he'd meet or break trying. The Hawthorne lab hummed under the California sun, a sleek sprawl of glass and steel pulsing with quiet intensity as Elon Musk stood by the Neuralink workbench, sharp eyes tracing the Echo prototype. A silver band glinting with solar cells, its chip humming with Walter Musk's voice. A gift to weave his grandfather's lost dreams into a family stretched by time. Dust swirled in the noon light streaming through high windows, the air thick with solder and static, a steady buzz of engineers and coders swirling around. Screens flickering, tools clattering, a rhythm Elon drove with relentless fire. His boots scuffed the polished floor, mud from Biggs or a faint stain, but his mind drifted, past the lab, past the tape stacked nearby. Rocket theories, flight dreams, stories for the boys. To Pretoria nights, to Walter's steady voice, to a dream his grandfather had whispered under stars, a spark Elon carried to this moment, a gift to heal a regret he sensed in Errol's silence, a circle he'd close in 7 weeks. He leaned on the bench, sharp eyes narrowing on the band, sleek, light, solar cells catching the sun, a chip syncing Walter's voice to brainwaves, a neural echo to feel real, a whisper from a past he'd forge into the future. The lab buzzed, Priya threading stories for the boys into code, Walter's rumble breaking through. Guts and math, laddie, figure the thrust, you're there. A tale Elon saw in Pretoria's dust, a porch under stars, a boy wide-eyed at 6, a spark he'd carried to SpaceX to this gift. But his mind slipped deeper, past the lab's hum, to a memory sharp as a blade. Walter's dream, a whisper from a night that lit his relentless fire, a vow he'd kept alive through decades, a gift to pull Errol from Durban's shadows, a regret he'd mend with this echo, a circle to close. He saw it, Pretoria's summer haze, the air thick with dust and heat, a small house with a sagging porch where Walter sat, silver hair glinting under a bare bulb, voice low over the cricket's hum. Elon, barely 7, perched on the steps, knees drawn up, hands sticky with lemonade Walter had pressed into them. Tart, homemade, a treat from a man who stretched every rand thin. Kimball dozed beside him, head lolling, but Elon stayed awake, sharp eyes locked on Walter as he pulled a napkin from his pocket, pencil scratching fast, a rocket sleek bold, its nose piercing the sky. "See this, laddie?" Walter said, voice steady despite a cough, rough hands tracing the lines. "A ship to touch the stars, simple, strong, guts and math, that's the trick, dream big, bigger than me." Elon's chest swelled, small fingers smudging the ink, sharp eyes wide. A vow forming he couldn't voice, a spark he'd carry to this moment, this gift. The memory sharpened, Walter's shed tin-roofed, oil thick in the air, tools clattering as Elon, now 8, handed him a wrench, small hands fumbling but eager. The bulb buzzed, casting shadows on a half-built propeller. A salvage job Walter had wrestled from junkyards, his hands steady despite a cough he'd brushed off. "It's the structure, laddie," Walter said, voice low, guiding Elon's hand to tighten a bolt. "Simple, strong, like the sky, dream it, build it." Elon's sharp eyes traced the lines, a lesson sinking deep. Every Tesla battery, every SpaceX rocket, a spark from Walter's hands, a man who'd coughed through tales, who'd given him the sky, a dream Elon saw in that napkin sketch, a vow he'd kept alive, a gift to heal a family, a regret he'd mend. Another scene flared, Pretoria's winter chill. The house dark save for a lamp's glow, Walter at the table, sketching fast, Elon beside him, breath fogging as Kimball slept upstairs, May's hum drifting soft. Walter's pencil traced a rocket, sleek, bold, a dream from a man who'd flown planes but never touched space. "Takes guts, laddie," he said, voice low, a cough breaking through he'd waved off. "Guts and math, figure the fuel, the thrust, and you're halfway there. Dream big, higher than me." Elon's small hands smudged the ink, sharp eyes wide, a vow he'd whispered, "I'll build it, Grandpa." A promise to a man who'd sold his tools for Elon's books, who'd skipped meals to keep the lights on, who'd dreamed grand in a world too small, a spark he'd carried to this lab, this echo. Back in the lab, the memory faded, leaving a weight in Elon's chest, sharp eyes glistening, rare crack in his steel as he traced the band. Walter's dream, a rocket to the stars, a whisper he'd forge into this gift, a neural echo to pull Errol from silence, a regret he sensed in Durban's shadows, a wound he'd heal in 7 weeks. He saw Walter, silver hair, steady eyes, voice low. "You'll fly higher, laddie." A man who'd coughed through tales, who'd given him the sky, a spark he'd carried to Tesla, to SpaceX, to this moment, this gift. The lab hummed, Priya's screen glowing, Walter's rumble. Stories for the boys. A tale of Orion's belt, a map to the future, a boy wide-eyed under stars, a spark Elon forged into this echo, a gift to mend a family, a regret he couldn't name. Jared stepped up, tablet flashing. Storm alerts, dark clouds 3 days out, a threat to the lab's grid, a test for the Echo's solar cells. "Winds at 60, could knock power, backups live but tight," he said, voice low, steady, a frown creasing his brow. Elon's jaw tightened, sharp eyes on the band. Walter's voice, a gift, a deadline burning. 7 weeks, a fight he'd win, a storm he'd bend. "No knocks, triple it, solar's key. Pumps if it floods, 3 days we beat it," he snapped, voice sharp, relentless, a fire in his gut. Walter's dream, a legacy, a family to heal, a regret to mend. Jared nodded. "On it, generators up, teams pushing, echoes safe." The lab surged, techs hauling gear, coders racing, a rhythm Elon drove, a gift to close a circle, a whisper from Pretoria nights. He crouched by the band, sharp eyes tracing its curve, solar cells glinting, chip humming, Walter's voice threading through, a neural echo to feel real, to pull Errol from silence, a regret he sensed in Durban's shadows, a wound he'd face in 7 weeks. He saw Pretoria, Walter's porch, stars blazing, voice low. "Dream big, laddie, bigger than me." A cough breaking through, a spark he'd carried to this lab, this gift. The lab pulsed, screens flickered, tools clattered, a storm loomed, a gift rose. A whisper from the past, a spark from Pretoria nights, a voice to heal a family, a regret he'd mend, a deadline he'd meet or break trying. The California sky darkened over the Neuralink lab in Hawthorne, a bruise of gray swallowing the sun as Elon Musk stood at the workbench, sharp eyes locked on the Echo prototype. A silver band glinting with solar cells, its chip humming with Walter Musk's voice, a gift to weave his grandfather's legacy into a family stretched by time. Rain tapped the high windows, a faint patter swelling to a roar, the air thick with solder and static as engineers and coders scrambled. Screens flickering, tools clattering, a rhythm Elon drove with relentless fire. His boots scuffed the polished floor, mud from Biggs or a stubborn stain, but his chest burned. 7 weeks to the family reunion, a deadline searing his gut, a gift to pull Errol from Durban's shadows, to heal a regret he sensed in his father's gruff silence. A whisper from Pretoria nights he'd forge into reality with Walter's tapes. The storm loomed, a beast of wind and water, a test for the Echo, a threat he'd bend or break trying. He leaned on the bench, sharp eyes tracing the band, sleek, light, solar cells catching the lab's glow, a chip syncing Walter's voice to brainwaves, a neural echo to feel real, a whisper from a past he'd carried to May, Kimball, Errol. The tapes sat nearby, rocket theories, flight dreams, stories for the boys. Yellowed reels in Walter's precise scrawl, a spark from Pretoria he'd woven into this gift, a legacy to mend a family, a regret to heal. Jared Burkle splashed in, soaked, tablet flashing. Storm alerts, winds at 70 miles per hour, gusts to 90, a deluge 3 days out turned deadly now. "It's here, Elon, faster, worse, grids shaky, backups live, but solar's exposed," he said, voice sharp over the rain's howl, a frown creasing his brow. Elon's jaw tightened, sharp eyes on the band, Walter's voice, a gift, a deadline burning. 7 weeks, a fight he'd win, a storm he'd crush. No shaky, triple it, pumps, tarps, solar's key now, he snapped, voice relentless, a fire in his gut. Walter's dream, a legacy, a family to heal. The lab surged. Rain lashed the glass, wind rattling the frame. Techs hauling tarps over solar panels, their boots slipping on wet floors, shouts lost in the storm's roar. Elon grabbed a tarp, sprinting to the roof access, mud-soaked jeans heavy, sharp eyes blazing. Walter's voice a gift, a deadline he'd meet, a storm he'd bend. The wind slammed him, 70 miles per hour gusts tearing at his jacket, rain stinging his face as he wrestled the tarp over a panel, stakes clattering as he hammered them deep. Hands raw, chest heaving, a fire driving him. Walter's dream, a spark from Pretoria, a regret to mend. "Secure it," he yelled, voice raw over the howl, techs scrambling beside him, tarps snapping wild, a rhythm of defiance against the storm. A gift to close a circle, a whisper from the past, a legacy he'd save. Jared splashed up, drenched, tablet clutched, power alerts flashing, grid faltering, backup strained. Winds at 80, panels are holding, barely grids down. "Pumps maxed," he shouted, voice breaking through the rain's roar, sharp eyes wide under soaked hair. Elon's chest tightened, sharp eyes darting. Band on the bench below, Walter's voice threading through, a neural echo to pull Errol from silence, a regret he sensed in Durban's shadows, a wound he'd heal in 7 weeks. "Max it, SpaceX generators, now panels stay, echoes live," he barked, voice sharp, relentless, a fire in his gut, Walter's dream, a gift, a family to mend, a storm he'd crush. Jared nodded, sprinting off, shouting into a radio crackling with static. Techs hauling gear, pumps whirring, a desperate dance against the flood. A gift to heal, a circle to close. Elon stumbled back inside, rain streaming down his face, sharp eyes on the band. Solar cells glinting wet, chip humming, Walter's voice threading through, a whisper from Pretoria nights, a spark he'd carried to this lab, this fight. He saw Walter, silver hair, steady eyes, voice low. "A lighthouse stands through anything, laddie." A tale from a Durban storm, rain lashing their flat, Walter by the window, tea cooling, a cough breaking through he'd brushed off, a spark Elon carried to this moment, this gift. The lab shook, wind slamming glass, power flickering, Priya's screen glowing. Stories for the boys, Walter's rumble, guts and math, laddie. A tale he'd heard at 6, a spark he'd forged into this echo, a gift to mend a family, a regret he'd heal. He grabbed a wrench, bolting a panel brace, hands raw, sharp eyes blazing. Walter's voice, a gift, a deadline searing. 7 weeks, a fight he'd win, a storm he'd bend. He saw Pretoria, Walter's shed oil-thick, voice low. "Dream big, laddie, bigger than me." A cough breaking through, a spark he'd carried to Tesla, to SpaceX, to this lab, this gift. The lab pulsed, screens flickered, pumps roared, a coder shouting. "Syncs at 90%, depths live." Walter's voice threading through, a whisper to pull Errol from silence, a regret he sensed in Durban's shadows, a wound he'd heal. He hammered harder, rain soaking through, a fire in his gut. Walter's dream, a legacy, a family to mend, a storm he'd crush. Jared splashed back, soaked, voice raw. Generators up, powers holding, storms peaking, panels secure. Elon nodded, sharp eyes on the band. Walter's voice, a gift, a deadline burning. 7 weeks, a fight he'd win, a storm he'd bend. He saw Durban, Errol's flat, tea steaming, a cough he'd masked, a wince he'd dodged, a shadow Elon couldn't name, a regret he'd heal with this echo, a whisper from Pretoria nights, a spark he'd carried to this lab, this fight. The rain roared, wind slamming glass, but the lab held, screens glowed, pumps whirred, a gift rose, a whisper from the past, a legacy to heal a family, a regret he'd mend, a deadline he'd meet or break trying. The Durban dusk draped the city in a golden shroud, a faint glow seeping through the cracked window of Elon Musk's modest flat as he sat in his sagging armchair, sharp blue eyes squinting at the chipped mug of tea cradled in his trembling hands, the sea's steady roar a quiet hum beyond the thin walls. The TV flickered, SpaceX's latest triumph, Elon's voice a distant rumble from a world Errol had watched his son conquer, a world far from this quiet life. But his mind drifted, past the flat, to Pretoria nights, to Walter Musk's steady tales, a spark he'd buried under gruff silence, a regret simmering in the ache he hid, a thud he'd brushed off for months. At 79, his weathered frame slumped, hands rough from years of engineering and flying planes now shaky. A shadow he wouldn't name, a cough he masked, a life paired to tea and solitude. A man who'd raised sons to soar, who drifted from them as they did, a wound he couldn't face, not yet. The door creaked and Kimball Musk stepped in, broad frame filling the narrow hall, a suitcase swinging from his hand, his grin a flash of Pretoria summers. Warm, relentless, a brother's charm honed to crack Errol's shell. Hey, Papa, time to pack. LA family reunion. 7 weeks out, but we're going early. Elon's got something big, won't say what, Kimball said, voice bright, a lie smooth with practice, the Neuralink echo a secret he'd sworn to keep. Errol grunted, sharp eyes narrowing, suspicion flaring. A fisherman's gut reading the tide, a cough breaking through he masked with a sip. Why now? Elon's busy, rockets, cars, could have called, he muttered, voice gruff, rough with years, the ache a thud he ignored, a wince he hid as he shifted, breath short for a beat before steadying. Kimball's grin held, soft, steady. Family catch-up, grandkids'll be there. May's pushing it, scenic flight, coast stuff, you'll like it. Errol's sharp eyes pierced Kimball, suspicion hardening. A trip halfway round the world, a vagueness he couldn't shake, a riddle tugging at him like Walter's tales under Pretoria stars. Scenic, huh? Waste of jet fuel. Something's up, Mijo, he rasped, voice breaking into a cough he waved off. Nothing, he told himself, just age, a lie he'd lived as the ache flared sharp, a shadow he hid. Kimball shrugged, easy charm a shield. Elon's mad, big ideas, trust me Papa, pack light, tea if you want, jets tomorrow. Errol grunted, sharp eyes on the suitcase. A flat life, a man who'd built planes, raised sons. Now paired to this, a trip he'd grumble through, a secret he sensed but couldn't name, a regret simmering under gruff pride, a wound he'd face in 7 weeks. The flat stayed quiet, the seas hum a steady pulse, and Errol stood slow, a wince crossing his face as he shuffled to the shelf. Photos faded but alive. Elon blazing, Kimball grinning, Walter steady on a Pretoria porch, a wooden box etched with a rocket beside them, a relic from a boy's vow under stars. He lifted it, rough hands trembling, the ache flaring, a thud, a cough, a shadow he wouldn't name, a regret he'd buried when Walter died, a rift he'd widened with silence, drifting from May's warmth, Kimball's grin, Elon's fire. You'll build it, laddie, Walter had said, voice steady despite a cough, a spark Errol had watched fade, a loss he'd locked tight, a past he couldn't face, not yet. He saw Pretoria, Walter's shed oil-thick, voice low. Dream big, bigger than me. A man who'd given them the sky, a spark he'd let slip, a regret simmering in the ache he hid. Kimball hauled the suitcase to the counter, unpacking tea. A ritual from lean years when Errol stretched fish thin, giving the boys the meat, chewing bones with a gruff grin. A life he'd paired to this, a man who'd drifted as his sons soared, a regret he wouldn't voice. Jet's early, grandkids'll soften you, May's excited, Kimball said, voice warm, charm a hook, a lie he'd honed to pull Errol west. Errol's sharp eyes darted, piercing. A fisherman's gut, a cough breaking through he masked, breath short, the ache a thud he ignored. Excited, huh? Something's off, Elon's mad, you say. Quiet for him, he rasped, voice rough, raw, suspicion flaring. A riddle he couldn't crack, a secret he sensed in Kimball's grin, a past tugging at him. Walter's voice, a spark he'd buried, a regret he'd face in 7 weeks. The TV droned, Elon's voice sharp, relentless, a son who'd built wonders from Walter's spark, a world Errol watched from afar, a pride he wouldn't shout, a regret simmering in the ache he hid, a shadow he couldn't name. He packed slow, tea a sweater, the wooden box, rough hands trembling, the ache flaring, a thud, a cough, a secret he'd kept from Kimball, from Elon, from himself, a lie he'd lived as he drifted, a man who'd raised sons to soar, who'd locked Walter's loss tight, a wound he'd face when the echo broke through. Kimball's phone buzzed, Kimball glanced, a text from Elon. Storm's hell, echoes live, 7 weeks Errol go. He typed back, jet set grumbling clueless, storm bad? Errol caught the flicker, sharp eyes narrowing. Something up, Mijo? He asked, voice low, gruff, suspicion sharp. Elon, mad stuff, trust me, Kimball said, grin smooth, charm a shield, a secret he'd keep, a gift he'd guard. The flat darkened, the seas roar a steady pulse, and Errol shuffled to the window. Durban's sprawl fading, the ocean a grey hum calling him west, a pull he'd known since Pretoria, a spark he'd buried, a regret simmering in the ache he hid. He saw Walter, silver hair, steady eyes, voice low. You'll fly higher, laddie. A man who'd coughed through tales, a spark he'd carried to this moment, a gift he didn't know waited. A Neuralink echo, a whisper to heal, a bridge to pull him from silence, a regret he'd face in 7 weeks. Family thing, huh? He muttered, voice rough, raw, sharp eyes on Kimball, a suspicion he couldn't crack, a riddle tugging at him. Walter's voice, a past he'd locked tight, a wound he'd face when the jet touched down, a circle he'd close without knowing. The dusk deepened, the flat silence save for the sea's hum, and Errol gripped the box. Walter's rocket, Elon's vow, a spark he'd watched fade, a regret simmering in the ache he hid, a shadow he wouldn't name, a journey he'd grumble through, a gift he'd meet in 7 weeks, a whisper to heal a family stretched by time. The Los Angeles dawn broke soft over the Neuralink lab, a pale gold spilling through high windows as Elon Musk stood in the quiet, sharp eyes tracing the finished Echo. A sleek silver band glinting on a workbench, its solar cells shimmering, a chip humming with Walter Musk's voice, a gift to weave his grandfather's legacy into a family stretched by time. The storm's chaos had faded, rain a faint drip outside, the lab steady with the hum of screens and solder, a rhythm Elon had driven through 7 weeks of relentless fire. His boots scuffed the polished floor, mud from Big Sur a stubborn stain, but his chest swelled. A gift complete, a deadline met, a whisper from Pretoria nights to pull Errol from silence, to heal a regret he'd sensed in Durban's shadows. A circle he'd closed today as the family reunion dawned, a moment he'd forged with Walter's tapes, a spark from the past to mend the present. The lab door creaked, and Kimball Musk stepped in, broad frame steady, his grin a flash of Pretoria summers, guiding Errol Musk behind him. Sharp blue eyes squinting, weathered face stern, hands trembling as he clutched a small wooden box etched with a rocket, a relic from Walter's days. Made it, Elon. Jet lag's hell, but he's here, grumbling all the way, Kimball said, voice warm, charm a shield that had pulled Errol from Durban's quiet. Errol grunted, sharp eyes darting. A cough breaking through he masked with a frown, the ache a thud he'd hid, a shadow he wouldn't name. Bloody fuss, why drag an old man here? He rasped, voice gruff, rough with years, suspicion flaring. A fisherman's gut, a regret simmering under pride, a wound he'd faced today. Elon's sharp eyes softened, a rare crack in his steel, stepping forward with the band. Walter's voice, a gift, a bridge, a circle to close. Papa, Elon said, voice low, steady, holding the echo, sleek, silver, a whisper from the past. For you, for us, Walter's voice. Neuralink sinks it. Feel him like he's here. Errol's sharp eyes widened, hands trembling as he took the band, suspicion cracking. A cough breaking through, breath short, the ache flaring sharp he couldn't mask. Walter? He choked, voice rough, raw, a sob stirring as he slipped it on, solar cells glinting, a haptic pulse nudging his wrist. A gift, a spark, a regret he'd face. The lab fell silent, Kimball's grin fading to awe, and Walter's voice broke through. Stories for the boys. Low, steady, a rumble from Pretoria nights. Guts and math, laddie. Figure the thrust, you're there. A tale Elon had heard at 6, a spark he'd carried to this moment, a whisper to heal a family. Errol froze, sharp eyes glistening, tears spilling fast down his weathered cheeks. A flood he couldn't stop, decades of silence shattering. A sob breaking raw as Walter's voice filled his mind, steady despite a cough, a spark he'd buried, a regret he'd locked tight. Bloody hell, Walter, he choked, voice thick, trembling, hands clutching the band. A gift, a bridge, a wound breaking open, tears streaming as he slumped, breath ragged, the ache a thud he couldn't hide. He's here, my father, he rasped, sharp eyes red. A fisherman's shell cracking wide, a regret spilling out. A loss he'd buried when cancer took Walter, a rift he'd widened with silence, drifting from May, from Kimball, from Elon, a wound he'd face now, a circle closing in this lab. Elon sank beside him, sharp eyes wide, mud-streaked hands steady on Errol's shoulder, voice low, raw, a crack in his steel. Papa, Walter's here, for us, for you. Everything he gave me, I built this, 7 weeks, fought the storm, for this. Errol's sob deepened, sharp eyes meeting Elon's, red, broken, tears streaming as he gripped the band. Walter's voice, a gift, a bridge, a regret he'd mend. You mad boy, he choked, voice rough, raw, a laugh breaking through, gruff, shaky. A fisherman's pride bending to a son's fire, a spark from Pretoria nights, a whisper to heal. Kimball stepped close, eyes glistening, voice soft. Papa, he's been with us. Elon made it real. Damn storm couldn't stop him. Errol nodded, slow, tears spilling, the ache a thud he couldn't mask, a shadow he'd hid, a regret he'd face, a circle closing. The lab glowed, screens flickered, the echoes hum a steady pulse, Walter's voice threading through. You'll fly higher, laddie. A tale from a porch under stars, a spark Elon had carried to Tesla, to SpaceX, to this moment, this gift. Errol's sharp eyes softened, red glistening, a hand pressing his chest, breath short, a cough breaking through, a shadow he couldn't hide, a truth spilling out as tears fell. Been slowing, he rasped, voice thick, raw, a sob breaking. Heart, you're now, didn't want fuss, Walter's gone, thought I'd lost him. Elon's chest tightened, sharp eyes wide, grief surging, a regret he'd sensed in Durban's shadows, a wound he'd heal with this echo, a gift he'd fought for, a circle he'd close. Papa, no fuss, us together. Elon said, voice low, blunt, mud-streaked hands firm. A son's fire bending raw. Walter's here. Echoes yours, doctors. Now no hiding. Errol's sharp eyes met his, tears streaming, a sob breaking as he slumped, breath a rasp, the ache of truth he couldn't mask. A year of silence, a shadow he'd hid, a regret spilling out. Walter's loss, a rift he'd widened, a wound he'd face with this gift, a circle closing. Mad, mad boys, he rasped, a laugh breaking through, gruff, shaky, gripping Kimball's hand. Father and sons, a bond stretched by time, now tethered here, a whisper from Pretoria nights, a spark he'd carried, a regret he'd mend. The lab stood still, the echoes hum a steady pulse. Walter's voice, a gift, a bridge, a family healed, a regret faced, a circle closed. Errol sat, sharp eyes tracing the band. Walter's rumble, a spark from a past he'd buried, a wound breaking open, a truth he'd hid. Heart failure, a year of silence, a shadow he'd masked with gruff pride, now spilling out in tears he couldn't stop, a gift he'd wear to heal, a circle he'd close with his boys. Worth it, he murmured, voice rough, raw, tears glistening. A fisherman's pride bending, a spark from Pretoria nights, a legacy alive, a regret he'd mend, a family he'd hold in 7 weeks fought for, a whisper to heal. Where are you listening from? We'd love to know in the comments. If this story of family, sacrifice, and healing touched you, please like and subscribe for more. Share it with loved ones. Sometimes the greatest gifts bring us closer when it matters most. Thanks for joining us.